Cancer can feel just totally chaotic, right? Like this unpredictable force of nature. But what if I told you that underneath all that chaos, there's actually a playbook? A set of rules that most cancers follow to survive and, well, thrive. So let's dive into this playbook and decode the so-called superpowers that turn a normal cell into a rogue one.
So it really all boils down to this one huge question that has baffled scientists for a long time. How does one of our own cells, a cell that's supposed to be on our team, go rogue and become what the source material brilliantly calls an outlaw organ, a tumor that just refuses to play by the rules?
And the answer is, it's not random at all. That cell acquires a very specific set of abilities, a progression of new powers. This framework, which we now call the hallmarks of cancer, gives us a really logical way to understand this incredibly complex disease. It's basically the villain's instruction manual.
Okay, so before our villain gets any of these crazy superpowers, the stage has to be set. The cell's most basic, fundamental systems have to break down first. These are called the enabling characteristics. Think of them as the initial cracks in the foundation that make everything else that's about to happen possible.
And it really comes down to two big problems at the very beginning. First, the cell's genetic blueprint, its DNA, starts to shatter. It loses its ability to protect itself, and this instability just throws the door wide open for all sorts of dangerous mutations. And second, the body's own immune system gets corrupted. Inflammation, which is supposed to be a healing process, gets hijacked and twisted into a force that actually helps the tumor grow. It's like a wound that just never, ever heals.
All right, so once those foundations are cracked, the cell starts its transformation. It begins picking up new skills, or as we're calling them, superpowers. These are the actual tools it needs to break free from all the normal rules about growth and survival. And here they are, the whole list, the 9 big ones. You can almost think of this as the villain's skill tree in a video game. Each one of these hallmarks represents a fundamental biological barrier that the cancer cell has figured out how to overcome. Let's walk through them. First up, and this is the most obvious one, is just endless, relentless growth. See, normal cells, they wait for a specific signal to tell them, okay, it's time to divide. Cancer cells, they hotwire the whole system. They figure out how to jam the go signal permanently on. It's literally like having a gas pedal that's stuck to the floor. A classic example is a mutation in a gene called KRAS. And get this, that one mutation is found in about 30% of all human tumors. But it's not enough just to jam the gas pedal, right? You also got to cut the brake lines. And that's exactly what this power is. Healthy cells have incredibly powerful genes called tumor suppressors that act like brakes on a car. Cancer finds a way to mutate and disable them. The most famous of these is a gene called TP53, and it's broken in something like 40% of all cancers. Okay, so the cell's going wild, growing like crazy. But what happens when something goes wrong inside it, when it gets damaged? Normally that cell would trigger a self-destruct sequence. It's a critical safety feature called apoptosis. Well, cancer cells learn how to dismantle that system entirely. They basically learn to ignore their own self-destruct orders, which makes them, in a way, immortal. And there's another clock, a mortal clock, ticking for almost all of our cells. Most of them can only divide a certain number of times, say 40 or 50 times, and then they stop. This is controlled by these little protective caps on our chromosomes called telomeres, and they get shorter every time a cell divides. Cancer figures out a way to constantly rebuild these little caps, basically smashing the clock and gaining the ability to divide forever. So at this point, our cancer cell is basically immortal and can't stop growing. But a single cell, even an immortal one, isn't a huge threat. To become a real problem, to build an empire, it needs infrastructure. It needs to expand its territory. And this is how it starts building that rogue empire. Think about it. A growing tumor is like a new city popping up out of nowhere, and every city needs roads, supply lines to bring in food and oxygen and to haul away the waste. So cancer cells send out these signals that trick the body into building brand new blood vessels that lead right to the tumor. This whole process, called angiogenesis, creates a private highway system to fuel its expansion. And then we get to what is probably the most devastating and deadliest superpower of all, conquering new territory. This is when cancer cells break away from that original tumor, get into those supply lines, the bloodstream, and travel to totally different parts of the body to start new colonies. This is metastasis, and it is the single biggest reason why cancer becomes so hard to treat.
Up to this point, we've been talking about the cancer cells like they're acting alone. But here's one of the biggest discoveries in cancer research. They don't.
The tumor isn't just a ball of cancer cells. It's a whole living ecosystem, and the cancer cells are master manipulators. They corrupt all the normal cells around them to help out their cause.
In a healthy neighborhood, all the cells work together, right? Resources are shared, immune cells patrol, there's cooperation. But in what's called the tumor microenvironment, or TME, the cancer cells become total dictators. They force their neighbors to work for them, reprogramming them to provide support, protection, even fuel. They even turn the local immune police into their own private bodyguards.
These corrupted neighbors are basically accessories to the crime. You have cells called fibroblasts, which are normally builders. Now they're forced to create a physical scaffold for the tumor. You have immune cells called macrophages that get reprogrammed from being hunters to being protectors of the tumor. It's wild. Even the cells that make up the blood vessels and nearby nerves get hijacked to serve the tumor's needs.
All right, so the empire's built, the neighborhood is totally corrupt. Now the cancer cell starts to develop its most advanced, most cunning abilities. These are the superpowers of deception and defense that make it such an incredibly tough opponent.
Think of the energy it takes to do all this. It's massive. So cancer cells completely rewire their energy production. They develop this just voracious appetite, and they start guzzling glucose and other nutrients from the body to fuel their constant, rapid growth. It's a totally different metabolic engine than the one in a healthy cell. Now, our immune system is designed to hunt down and kill cells like this. It's incredibly good at it. So how does cancer get away with it? It develops an invisibility cloak. It learns how to put up signals on its surface that basically tell incoming immune cells, hey, move along, nothing to see here. It actively hides from and shuts down the very system that's supposed to eliminate it.
And that brings us to the final and maybe the ultimate survival superpower, shape-shifting. Cancer cells can unlock this ability called phenotypic plasticity. It means they can literally change their identity. They can revert to a more primitive stem cell-like version of themselves, or even transform to look like a completely different type of cell. This makes them unbelievably adaptable, and it's a huge reason they become resistant to our treatments.
Okay, wow. That's the villain's playbook. 9 superpowers, all starting from 2 basic flaws. It sounds pretty bleak, right? But here's the beautiful part. Understanding this playbook is exactly how we're learning to fight back. This is the logic behind all of modern cancer therapy.
Because this whole framework shows us a massive vulnerability. If cancer needs to acquire all these different distinct powers to survive, then trying to fight it with just one weapon often isn't enough. So the smartest strategies today are based on hitting multiple hallmarks at the same time. It's a concept called hallmark co-targeting.
Let me give you a perfect real-world example of how this works. Doctors can now combine drugs for a two-pronged attack. First, they can use one drug to rip off the cancer's invisibility cloak. This lets our own immune system finally see the cancer and attack it. Then, at the very same time, they use a different drug to cut off the tumor's supply lines, blocking those new blood vessels from growing and essentially starving the tumor of resources.
So, by breaking cancer down into this logical set of superpowers, we change it. It stops being this random, terrifying monster and becomes a complex but solvable puzzle. Every single hallmark we just talked about is now a target for new therapies. And that leaves us with a final, really hopeful question. If we know the playbook, if we finally know all the rules of the game, can we finally figure out how to win?